Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you a shocking and impossible to ignore story. Let's meet Lucian Thorn, a man who faced death twice and came back with an urgent message about the future of humanity. During his near-death experience, he was taken to a heavenly city, where he encountered an angel messenger who revealed a terrifying prophecy about February 15 through 18, 2025. But someone doesn't want this truth told. What he saw on the other side will leave you speechless. So before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now, get ready for this surprising revelation. My name is Lucian Thorn, and this is the story that changed my life forever. I didn't expect that. I didn't want to believe it. But reality doesn't care about our beliefs. It just happens. I have always been a practical man. I grew up in Helena, Montana, but I left town as soon as I could. I became an architect and had a career in Seattle, far from the stillness of the mountains I once called home. The modern world offered me everything I thought I wanted: a fancy apartment, a stable job, and a comfortable distance from what I didn't want to face. My father, Isaiah Thorn, was a man of faith, not a blind faith, but a serene, unshakable faith. He believed that everything had a purpose, that every moment, no matter how bad it was part of something bigger. I, on the other hand, believed in what I could see, touch, and measure. When he was diagnosed with lung cancer, my reaction was the worst possible: denial. The truth hit me like a punch when my mother called one night. "Lucian, your father got worse. The doctor said it's a matter of days." The silence between us was deafening. My mouth went dry. I'm going to catch a flight, but I should have gone sooner. The regrets began to pile up as I packed my bags. For years, I convinced myself that my work was a valid justification for distance, that my father would understand. But what if he didn't understand? I took the first flight to Montana, trying to suppress the feeling that I was already late. Upon arrival, I checked into a small hotel close to my parents' house. The night was freezing, but my mind was buzzing. I couldn't sleep. And then it happened. A throbbing pain took over my head. My eyes felt heavy. The world spun around me. Then everything went black. Darkness enveloped me. The silence was absolute. But it wasn't scary. It was as if time had stopped, and I was suspended in an infinite void. My body, my consciousness, my very identity seemed to dissolve into nothingness. Then, slowly, the darkness began to dissipate. I opened my eyes and felt the warmth of a gentle sun touching my face. The air smelled fresh, filled with something I couldn't describe, like wet earth after rain, but with an almost heavenly sweetness. I was standing on backyard of the house where I grew up, but there was something different. The sky had a golden glow, as if it were bathed in light that didn't just come from the sun. The wind blew gently, but instead of the usual rustling of leaves, I heard a melodic sound, like a distant choir singing ethereal notes. My heart hammered against my chest. This is not real. My voice sounded strange. Or maybe it was the silence around that made everything clearer. It was then that I felt a presence behind me. I turned around slowly, and my heart stopped. My father was there. He was not the frail man I left on his deathbed. He was young, strong, healthy. Her skin, once scarred by time and illness, now radiated vitality. His gaze carried a peace I had never seen before. "Hi, son." My breathing hitched. "Father?" He smiled. That serene smile he always had. "You always questioned everything, didn't you? But now is not the time for doubts. I am here." My eyes filled with tears. Every part of me said this was impossible, but nothing in my body could resist the moment. Without thinking, I threw myself forward and hugged him. And he was but solid, real, alive. I smelled him. The same smell as always. Firewood and strong coffee. I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried since I was a child. He grabbed my shoulders and pulled me away just enough to look into my eyes. "I'm fine, Lucian. Free from pain. Now I need to show you something. Come with me." He turned and pointed to a path of light that opened before us, leading to an unknown horizon. I didn't know where he was going, but I knew I needed to follow him, and I followed. I followed my father down the path of light, each step taking me further from my childhood backyard and toward something incomprehensible. The ground beneath my feet felt solid, but at the same time, it wasn't made of dirt. It had a soft, almost ethereal texture, as if I were walking on a fabric of condensed light. The horizon expanded in front of me, and the scenery changed. We were in front of a golden portal, immense, grand, but without any weight. He shone like the sun itself, radiating an energy I couldn't describe in words. Behind the portal, a city floated in the sky. The buildings were translucent, as if they were made of light and crystal, and each structure seemed to be alive, breathing an energy of its own. Golden-leaved trees lined the paths, and the sky, oh, the sky. There was no sun, moon, or stars, but an indescribable light bathed everything in absolute serenity. I was speechless. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice coming out in a reverent whisper. My father looked at me with a twinkle in his eye. "That's what comes next, Lucian. But there is still more for you to see." He extended his hand, and when I touched his, we were immediately transported into the city. We don't walk, we don't fly, but we move as if the space between points simply ceased to exist. Now we were inside a grand hall, with a high ceiling, with columns that seemed to be made of celestial marble. In the center, there was a huge table, and above it, a golden book with a thick, shiny cover. Beside the book, a presence emerged. He was tall, imposing, and his mere existence made every cell in my body tremble. His eyes seemed to contain entire galaxies, and his face was both human and divine. "Nathaniel, welcome, Lucian." His voice didn't just echo in the room, but inside me. He pointed to the book. "Here are the marks your father left on the world, the invisible footprints that can only be seen from this side." My father opened the book, and what I saw took my breath away. Memories appeared before us, alive, pulsing. I saw my father helping strangers, welcoming neighbors in need, performing small acts of kindness that went unnoticed by everyone, including for me. The shock hit me like a punch. I never knew. My father put his hand on my shoulder, because I never did it to be seen. Love doesn't need an audience. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Nathaniel came closer and looked into me, as if he could see into my soul. "Kindness never dies, Lucian. She is an invisible legacy, but there's still more you need to know." Then he raised his hand, and a new vision began to form before us. Something much bigger was about to be revealed. The celestial room seemed to vibrate around us. The book before me began to glow with greater intensity, its pages turning on their own, as if they were being touched by an invisible force. Nathaniel, the angel, raised his hand, and in an instant, the space around us dissolved. Suddenly, we were no longer in that room. I found myself suspended above the earth, looking at the blue planet silently rotating in the vast universe. But there was something strange. Something was moving around the atmosphere, like undulating shadows, a living darkness writhing. It was as if a dark mist was trying to envelop the earth, but was unable to penetrate it completely. So, a ray of light came down from the sky, coming from a point I couldn't identify. It was pure, vibrant, like a torrent of energy pouring into the world. When it touched the earth's surface and the shadows momentarily dispersed, but soon began to return, more agitated, more aggressive, I felt a chill run down my spine. "What is happening?" I asked, feeling my own voice shake. Nathaniel turned to me, his expression solemn. "An event is approaching, Lucian. Between February 15th and 18th, 2025, something will happen on Earth. It will be a wake-up call." My hands balled into fists. What type of event? A disaster? A war? Neither one nor the other. It will be something bigger. It will be a revelation. The view changed again. I saw crowds of people around the world looking up at the sky, some kneeling in tears, others ecstatic. I saw lights cutting through the darkness. I saw buildings lit up as if they were pulsing with energy. But I also saw resistance, people running, desperate, trying to hide from something that was not a threat, but an inevitable truth. "What does this mean?" My voice was almost a whisper. Nathaniel looked at me, his eyes shining like stars. "The time of doubt is coming to an end. Many will see the truth and accept it. Others will resist, but no one will emerge unscathed." My heart was beating hard. And what do I have to do with this? The angel placed a hand on my shoulder. "You will be a messenger, Lucian. You must prepare people for what is coming." My mind was spinning. How could I, a man who has always rejected the unseen, be a messenger of something so great? But how do I do that? No one will listen to me. They'll call me crazy. Some do, but others will believe. The vision began to fade, and I felt like I was being pulled back. My breathing became short. I didn't want to leave there, not before understanding everything. My father, who was watching everything in silence, held my hand and smiled. "You always sought a purpose, Lucian. Now he found you." An immense light enveloped me, and, in the blink of an eye, everything collapsed into darkness. My body felt heavy, as if I were emerging from deep water. Then, I opened my eyes. The insistent sound of a phone ringing jolted me out of my daze. My chest heaved, my head throbbed. I was back. Still bewildered, I picked up the phone and answered. "Hello?" My voice was hoarse. On the other end of the line, I heard my brother's shaky breathing. "Lucian," he hesitated. "Father passed away a few minutes ago." My heart froze. It couldn't be. I finished to be with him. The prophecy was engraved in my soul. But how to tell the world? The phone slipped out of my hand. My brother's voice was still echoing on the line, but I could no longer hear him. The room around me seemed to spin, the walls closing in as my mind tried to process the impossible. "My father passed away a few minutes ago, but I was with him. I touched it. I spoke to him. I saw your smile. I heard your voice. How could this be?" My lungs constricted, and a lump formed in my throat. I didn't know if what I felt was despair, denial, or pure panic. I picked up the phone again and murmured, my voice cracking, How did it happen?" My brother took a deep breath before responding. He just stopped breathing. Mom was next to him. He smiled before leaving, as if he had seen something beautiful. My eyes burned. He smiled. I knew exactly what he saw. I closed my eyes and tried to pull the images back. The backyard, the heavenly city, the golden book, Nathaniel, the prophecy. Everything was so vivid, so real. But now, back in the physical world, it felt like a feverish delirium. I got up from the bed, my legs shaking. I walked to the mirror in the corner of the room. My appearance was ravaged, pale face or red eyes, sweat running down my forehead. I tried to convince myself that this was just a dream, a hallucination caused by stress, exhaustion, pain, but something inside me refused to accept this explanation. I knew that it was real, but what now? I looked at my own hands, as if hoping to find an answer there. I was just an ordinary man, an architect who avoided thinking about God, about life after death, about spiritual purposes. How could I be a messenger? My legs finally gave way, and I sat on the edge of the bed, burying my face in my hands. The weight of what I experienced crushed me. Between February 15th and 18th in 2025, a transformative event will take place on Earth. Those words still vibrated in my mind, but I didn't know what to do with them. Who would believe me? The phone rang again. My heart raced. I picked up the device and answered. This time, it was my mom. "Lucian, I know you're trying to be strong, but I need you here." I closed my eyes, fighting back the tears. I couldn't run away. Not this time. I am going. I hung up the phone and looked out the window. The dark Montana sky was filled with stars, shining as if they were winking at me, as if they were smiling. I needed to go home, and maybe, just maybe, I would find a way to understand what to do with all this. My father's funeral took place on a cold autumn morning. The sky was gray, heavy, as if nature itself mourned his departure. The small cemetery in Helena, Montana, surrounded by mountains covered in pine trees, seemed even smaller given the immensity of the moment. I stood next to my mother, who held a handkerchief in her hands, her eyes fixed on the coffin. My brother, Ethan, he remained rigid, his pain expressed in silence. People came, said kind words, remembered what a good man my father was, but I barely listened. My hands were shaking. The cold wind bit my skin, but the real cold came from within. Since I arrived, I've tried to ignore the voice in my mind repeating the prophecy. Between the days February 15th and 18th, 2025, my head throbbed. I couldn't tell anyone that. They would think I was in shock, that my grief was making me delirious. How could I look at my mother and say, "Mom, I saw Dad after he died. He took me to a heavenly city and an angel gave me a message about the future of the world. It would be an insult to your pain." So I remained silent. When the coffin was lowered into the earth, my chest tightened in a way I had never felt before. Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. My father was gone. I knew that. But at the same time, I knew he still existed somewhere. What should I do with this truth? Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table with my mother. The smell of coffee filled the air, bringing bittersweet comfort. She had her hands wrapped around her mug, looking at me as if she was waiting for something. I know there's something you're not telling me, Lucian. My heart stopped for a second. What do you mean? She let out a heavy sigh. Ever since you arrived, you've acted like you're carrying a huge weight, as if something other than your father's death was tormenting you. I couldn't lie to my mother, but the truth was too big to tell, so I swallowed hard and just said, I only regret not being here sooner. She smiled slightly, but the look in her eyes said she didn't completely believe it. You know, your father always said that death was not the end, that when the time came, he would find us again. My hands tightened on the coffee cup. Did he really believe that? She nodded. With every fiber of your being. He said love was eternal, that the things we do here continue after we leave, that there is always a purpose. I swallowed hard. What she said echoed exactly what I saw in the Book of Good Deeds. The silence prolonged. For a moment, I had the absurd desire to tell everything, to say that she was right, that I had seen my father, that the kindness he cultivated on earth was recorded in a heavenly book. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just whispered, he was right. My mother held my hand across the table. I know. That night, alone in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the ceiling, thoughts spinning. I didn't know but I knew that I needed to do something. My father dedicated his life to helping others, and I had spent most of my existence running only after success and money. The experience I had could not be in vain. In the dark, I made my decision. I would turn my pain into purpose. I would start helping communities, offering my time to anyone who needed it, and maybe someday, I would find the courage to tell the world about prophecy. But at that moment, I wasn't ready yet. I just knew that my life would never be the same. The years that followed were of transformation. After my father's funeral, I moved back to Helena, Montana, and I started doing something I never imagined, dedicating my time to helping others. I started small, volunteering at shelters, helping rebuild homes for families in need, offering support to young people who had nowhere to go. Each action brought me closer to what my father always believed. Kindness does not need recognition. It simply needs to be done. But deep down, I still carried the prophecy. Every day I asked myself when and how should I share it. How can you talk about something so unbelievable without sounding crazy? That's how, without realizing it, I started avoiding the question. I continued my work, made new friends, and even started giving talks about how small actions can change lives. People saw me as a man dedicated to charity, someone who had turned pain into purpose, but no one knew that, deep down, I was running away from my true calling. Until the day when the sky decided to remind me. It was a summer afternoon. A group of volunteers and I were restoring an old cabin in a mountainous area when the weather changed suddenly. The sky, previously blue and clear, turned black in a matter of minutes. The clouds rotated strangely, and a heavy silence took over the environment. The other volunteers decided to head down the trail before the storm got worse, but I stayed behind, checking the last of my tools before leaving. Then, the first thunder came. It was a sound I had never heard before, deep, as if the air itself was vibrating. Before I could react, a blinding flash ripped the sky apart. The lightning hit me straight. Everything went out. I opened my eyes, but he was no longer on the mountain. This time, the place was different. I was in a space vast, infinite, without horizon. The ground beneath me wasn't solid, but I didn't fall. The air was thick, and a faint bluish light filled everything around me. Then, a voice sounded. Lucian Thorn, you have not yet finished your mission. My heart almost stopped. I didn't see anyone, but I felt a powerful presence. It was then that the visions began. Before me, images of the future unfolded, as if I were watching time fold in on itself. Myself on stages, speaking to crowds about something I couldn't understand. I saw people crying, some falling to their knees, others running away in fear. I saw one wake up, a time when humanity would face the truth about its own existence. And then, I saw the date again, February 15th to 18th, 2025. But there was something new, something I hadn't seen before. The resistance, people trying to hide the truth, people fighting to keep the world as it was. I understood, at that moment, that it wouldn't be easy. The prophecy would not be accepted by everyone, and, more than that, there would be those who would try to prevent it from being fulfilled. The voice spoke again. You still fear, but there is no more time for hesitation. What was promised will happen. You choose. Will you be part of it, or will you hide? I tried to speak, but my voice wouldn't come out. Suddenly, I was pulled back to the physical world. The pain was unbearable. My body was shaking, and everything felt like it was burning. I was alive. The paramedics were all around me, their faces full of shock. "He's breathing!" one of them shouted. I was rushed to the hospital, but the doctors couldn't explain how I survived. The impact threw me back several meters, burned my clothes, but left nothing but a scar in the shape of a spiral in my chest, the same form I saw in the heavenly city. That night, lying in the hospital bed, I knew I couldn't run away anymore. I had to tell the world what was about to happen, and this time, I would have no choice. The pain was still throbbing in my body when I opened my eyes in the hospital room. The fluorescent lights flickered, and the monotonous sound of machines echoed around the room. My head was spinning, but something inside me was screaming that I was no longer in the same reality as before. The impact of the lightning should have killed me, but I was alive, and more than that, I knew something was different. My hands shook as I lifted my hospital shirt and looked at my chest. The scar was there, a perfect spiral. A shiver ran down my spine, the mark of the heavenly book. At that moment, the room door opened and a doctor entered, followed by a nurse. "Mr. Thorne, you were incredibly lucky. The lightning should have caused severe internal damage, but all his tests are normal. There are no extensive burns, no cardiac trauma. Honestly, there is no medical explanation for you being alive and lucid." I tried to swallow hard, but my throat was dry. "And the scar?" The doctor looked at me curiously, frowning. "We thought it was strange. There was nothing when you arrived, but hours later it appeared. I've never seen anything like it. It looks more like a mark than a wound." The nurse exchanged a quick look with him before approaching my bed. "Did you have any experiences while you were unconscious?" My heart raced. Did she know? My mind flashed back to the moment before I woke up. The visions. They were still clear, as real as any memory in my life. I saw myself in front of crowds, holding a microphone, my voice echoing among the people. Some were crying. Others looked at me with deep fear, as if the truth I was telling them was too much to bear. Then I saw something much worse. People trying to silence me. Figures in suits and ties gathered in a dark room, discussing my name. I was a threat. They did not want the prophecy to be heard. The vision flashed again, and I saw myself alone, looking at the sky. The date appeared before me, written in fire, February 15th to 18th, 2025. Time was running out. My breathing became heavy. I looked up at the nurse and just shook my head. "No, I don't remember anything." Her eyes scanned mine for a second before she simply nodded. The doctor finished his check and said I could be discharged the next day. But before leaving, the nurse stopped at the door and looked at me over her shoulder. "Maybe it's time to stop running, Mr. Thorne," and left. I was paralyzed. Did she know? Or did someone send it to me to test? I couldn't put it off any longer. I needed to share the prophecy, but at the same time, the vision showed me that there were forces that didn't want me to speak. If I opened my mouth, I would be putting my life at risk. I closed my eyes. You needed to decide. The hospital seemed smaller when I walked out the front door the next morning. The cool morning air of Helena, Montana, filled my lungs, but it wasn't enough to ease the weight I was carrying in my chest. I was alive, but I wasn't the same man who walked in there. I took a taxi back to my house, my hands balled into fists the entire time. The images of vision of the future were still alive in my mind. People listening to me, people trying to stop me, and above all, that date engraved like fire, February 15th to 18th of 2025. The clock was ticking. When I got home, I locked the door and went straight to the bathroom. I turned on the tap and washed my face in trying to ignore my reflection in the mirror. But when I looked up, there it was she, the scar, the perfect spiral in my chest. I took a deep breath and leaned my back against the cold wall. My mind swirled with questions. What would happen if I spoke? I could record a video. I could write a book, go out and tell the world about the prophecy. But who would believe it? And even worse, what would they do to me? I closed my eyes and tried to calm my mind. It was then that something strange happened. I felt a heat in my chest. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there, as if a light fire burned inside me, not from pain, but from purpose. Then, a certainty hit me. I was chosen. I didn't need to know as or because. All that mattered was that this message needed to be shared. The question was no longer, what will happen if I talk? The question was, what will happen if I don't talk? I got up slowly. My fingers were still shaking when I picked up the phone. I opened the recording app and looked at the screen. I took a deep breath, and then I pressed the button to record. My name is Lucian Thorn. I'm not a prophet. I'm not a preacher. I'm just a man who saw something no one is prepared to see. In February 2025, something will happen. Something that will change the world forever. I know this because I saw it. And if you're hearing this, it's because you need to know too. From the moment I pressed post, something changed inside me. The message was out in the world now. There was no turning back. In the first few days, the video received a few views. Most of the comments were skeptical, mocking. Another lunatic. The guy got hit by lightning and thinks he turned into Moses. But then, the messages started arriving different. I had a dream about that date. Something is changing in the air. I feel it. You are not alone. There were few at the beginning. But day after day, more people came to me. Some with similar dreams. Others with intuitions they never knew how to explain. But at the same time as people started to listen, others wanted me to stop. Remove this video. You don't know what you're dealing with. This isn't a warning. It's a last request. My phone started receiving calls from unknown numbers. Some, when answered, they didn't say anything, just silence. Other times, I heard an electronic voice repeating, "It appears." Then one day the video disappeared. My channel was suspended without explanation. My email account has been blocked. It was like someone wanted to erase my digital existence. But I knew it was too late. Time is running out. The dates are coming. I still don't know exactly what will happen between the days February 15th and 18th, 2025, but I know that something is coming. And now, my mission is not just to tell you what I saw and figure out how to prepare people, because when that day comes, or we will be ready, or we will be swallowed by the unknown. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.